The more I learn about consciousness, the less I'm sure it exists. The little c, being conscious, being aware, exists moment to moment, but the capital C consciousness, the self, the identity, the soul, I think that might be a joke. That might be a trick to keep the meat machine moving in one direction.
What makes you feel that way?
Because we have so many ways that consciousness is easily abolished, that the overarching sense of self is easily abolished. We have moments of being aware, but memory is necessary for self, and you can have breaks in information processing that rapidly erode your ability to be present or be yourself. I also think that in very many cases, we're discovering the brain will have already made the decision, made the sensory observation, made the attention judgment, half a second before the mind becomes aware of it and decides. So I think we're in this sort of automatic mode, and the evolutionary pushes are really what are there, the drive reduction stuff, really what are there. And it's nicer to have an identity wrapped around that. So the illusion of continuity is created. And that's what consciousness is, or the self is. It's the continuity illusion. So really what we are a ship of Theseus. We're replacing planks all the time and becoming very different ships later on. But the trick, the grand illusion, is that continuity of self. And I think that's, I'm really quite skeptical these days that there's an overarching self or an underlying self or soul.
Yeah.
Now, I do think we're just starting to figure out where being conscious, that sensation of being aware and present and sapient, we're starting potentially to get a handle on that at the intersection of neuroscience and quantum physics, where there's these structures inside of neurons called microtubules that run the length of the neuron. And they're kind of like little highways that move information up and down. And it turns out the shape of the microtubule is sufficient to allow water molecules to move through quantum tunneling effects. It's perfectly sized and shaped to allow non-traditional movement through space. And so for years that was observed and then dismissed, that the brain cannot have quantum effects. It's hot and wet, it can't happen. Well, more and more research is pointing at this. And then a great physicist, Roger Penrose, came up with a theory a decade ago now that the consciousness might be the neuron's awareness of that quantum field collapsing into the present moment. That seems to be what consciousness is. OOR, orchestrated objective reduction. That consciousness might be the quantum possibilities collapsing into a unique event in the level of the microtubules. So that exists. Awareness exists. But I think the fact that we're tying it to our birthday party 10 years ago and our future plans is kind of a joke. It's kind of the trick of having a body.
Yeah. No, that's so interesting. We're always limited by our language in a lot of ways, but even when we see something like our awareness, or there's an awareness of that, it's what is it that's being aware? Because for me, when I think of consciousness, I almost think of less of the narrative, the long arcing narrative of do I have a consciousness? Because I think, even if you went down a spiritual path or other paths, you kind of go back into oh, well, there's not really any separation between anything anyway. So that level of consciousness construct is an illusion on some level, right? But I think of consciousness almost as that awareness is how I often think of consciousness. So that always makes me go into okay, well, what? Because I remember even hearing that basically how the cells are interpreting their environment, not just the environment itself, but how they interpret the environment determines how the gene expresses itself, right? Yeah. So there's all these little things, but then I still go back to, well, then what is it that is aware? What is the thing that is aware?
It gets weirder. Yeah. I got my PhD studying in a laterality lab, left-right hemisphere division lab, where you can look at individual hemispheric function as it separates in the hemispheres. And my advisor, a guy named Dr. Eran Zeidel, himself was a grad student who assisted in a lot of the work that Roger Sperry and Joe Bogan did on split brain subjects with epilepsy. And back in that research, as well as the research I did with Dr. Zeidel, you can identify and demonstrate completely separate attention and awareness systems in each hemisphere.
Whoa.
Come online late, the very last minute, to become a complete idea. But we have separable attention, response, decision-making, awareness in each hemisphere. So even in intact brains, we do.
Yeah. So literally what I'm hearing you say is on that level, we have literally two brains that are
We may
functionally
have
operate.
multiple brains. We may have,
Right.
memory systems stored throughout the body. We have specialized tissues that do certain things. But yeah,
Mm.
the complete loop of attention and behavior is duplicated in both hemispheres. And even in a person with connected hemispheres, you can separate those things. If you flash something on the screen, if you're looking at the middle of the screen and you flash something on one side, it comes to one visual field and goes back to one hemisphere. So each eye has two visual fields, left and right. And so
Right.
the left side of each eye goes to the right visual field in each eye, goes back to the right hemisphere. So it converges. Each eye converges to the hemisphere. And if you then make somebody respond with the hand that's being driven by that hemisphere, you can keep the information in one hemisphere only in a behavioral test. So you can test through attention testing how information's flowing in one hemisphere or force it to cross hemispheres and look at how the individual hemispheres work in attention and other cognitive resources. I did a 40 subject, fully blind, placebo controlled, looking at left hemisphere training with low beta and high beta, right hemisphere training with low beta or sham in 4 groups of people. And you can see the brain reacting when there's a beep to an actual brainwave event. But if it's a beep that's not contingent to their brain, there's no burst of brainwaves in response to it. The brain figures out that it's neurofeedback. That's the trick, is the brain's doing all the heavy lifting here. This is not magical. It's just associative learning. The brain's doing the learning event, and we just captured it in the EEG.
What's so fascinating to me about that is what you just said, which is that the brain is able to realize that it's learning, right? Because I could show it like different beeps and stuff, but it's actually figuring out that it is having a relationship that is impacting on this thing, which would me also, I don't know, suggest that like there's a big difference in the brain's ability to actually understand the things that it even can make an impact on, I want to say, right? Like we can tell when something.
Well, it's below cognition. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
if you're a baby flopping around on the ground and suddenly you do a baby push-up, you're like, whoa, I can see 12 feet. Oh my gosh, all this stuff. The brain goes, ooh, remember those neurons. Next time you want to get more stuff, do the thing.
Right.
But the mind's not really involved with that at that level. When you're a baby, it's like, I just did something. Okay, I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
And that's how associative learning works. You find stuff that's already existing, and then you reward part of it. You shape, you applaud one end of the behavioral domain, and the brain goes, oh, okay. And you start shaping it. You progressively applaud. So most neurofeedback is Skinnerian conditioning. It's like Skinner's pigeons, where pigeons already peck, but Skinner got them to peck in certain patterns by first rewarding them when they got near the food bar, and then rewarding them when they tapped the food bar, and then they pressed it twice, and then 3 times. You approximately shape the behavior. Neurofeedback is shaping the behavior of brainwave amplitude or speed or connectivity.
Yeah.
So it's involuntary behavior, but it's still happening, and your brain notices if the behavior is contingent to the outside world. If it does something and the world then reacts, the brain notices, even if the mind's like, this is stupid. Why am I sitting here? Which happens all the time. People are like, really? This Pac-Man stopping and starting. This is training my brain. Really? Well, yeah, see what you think. And like 3 sessions in, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Oh, okay. I think I'm feeling something. Nah, I'm imagining it, and it wears off. And the next time they're like, oh no, wait a minute. Okay. And then you get a sleep change. So it is the sort of thing that as you get into neurofeedback or any other kind of brain intervention, you start to notice this progressive build, and it leaves you in a very different place.